Welcome to On the Bauble Podcast, Episode 5. I'm your host, Sabasa J. Ueda, and with me is my co-host, Yuki Lee Bender. And today we're doing a pre-recorded show, and today is August 15th, because Yuki will be in Europe at the release of this episode. And I thought this would be a great time to pick her brain and get some sneak peek at what Yuki's planning to do this Pro Tour. But before that, what are you planning on doing in Europe, going a week early?
Yeah, so I'll be leaving on the Wednesday morning, arriving Thursday morning in Amsterdam, and just going to be doing some touristy stuff in Amsterdam, check out some museums, and then I have some other friends in the Netherlands who play Fab, and I'll be playing with them. We have sort of like a draft camp planned and maybe like a bit of a barbecue kind of a thing. After that, I'll be checking out Brussels for a couple of days and meeting up with Zane. Shout out to Zane. And we're going to be heading down to the Pro Tour together. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We'll check out the Players Banquet, and I have a couple of days afterwards. So I'll probably check out Paris. But honestly, it's going to go by quick because some of it's the Pro Tour prep. I kind of have like about a week beforehand, and I think it's going to go by really, really fast.
Yeah, that sounds like fun. But as always, let's start off with the question of the week. Thank you for everyone who submitted questions via Twitter. As we said last week, there should already be a Twitter post from Yuki asking for more questions. But today we're going to go over Sammy, Mother of Dragons, tweet. And she says, I'd like to know what you like to do after a tournament so that you can learn and get stronger.
Yeah, so I love this question. I think that, after a tournament, it's easy to feel all kinds of things depending on how the event went. But thinking about the learnings and the takeaways is really important to improving yourself as a player. So awesome question. For me, I like to focus on, rather than the result, I like to focus on my in-game decisions and my tournament preparation and how I feel about that. So I try to evaluate, like, was the metagame more or less what I predicted? Were there any like gaps or decks that we missed that weren't just like total rogue decks that we never could have predicted? Like maybe we just didn't respect something that we should have. And in my in-game decisions, were there mistakes? Were there leaks in my gameplay? Were there learnings that I had where I realized, oh, in this matchup I should be doing this, or maybe there's a certain type of mistake that I'm making, and I want to be able to identify that and find constructive ways to improve on that in the future. So rather than focusing on the result, really thinking about like what's in your control and what you can do to improve on whatever those problems might be, whether it's tournament prep or gameplay related. I find like often like creating for the gameplay stuff, I often just find like creating sort of like ways of thinking of going through your turn, like you go through the same steps every time and you just make sure that you check every single time, and that kind of helps. Like if you have a routine, it makes it easier to not forget triggers and tunics and stuff like that. What about you, Jay?
I personally don't do much after a tournament. Typically, after a tournament, I either feel really bad or really good, depending on how I did, obviously. And then most of my prep or like preparing for an event is always before the tournament, and I do almost everything I can to prepare for it. So almost after a tournament, I just say, yeah, that was the result, and I move on to the next tournament. So whatever tournament I'm going to go to for whatever card game I'm playing, I just need to switch my gears and prepare for the next game, because a lot of the time for myself, I don't just play Flesh and Blood, I play a lot of other games too. So if it's like a Magic event coming up, I'll be like, okay, what's the meta game for that game? What am I doing? If it's like a different game like White Schwartz, like is there a deck I need to be learning, or is there some new top tier deck? So a lot of my prep comes before the tournament, and I do everything I can to win that tournament. And then when that's over, I have to switch over to the next game because I play so many of them.
Yeah, and I think even if you're not like Jay and you don't play so many different card games, I do think that like not getting too hung up on a bad result is really, really important. everybody has bad events, and lingering on it and beating yourself up over it is not really going to do you a lot of good. So focus on, I guess in a way we're similar, like focusing on what you can do in the future. In Jay's case, maybe for a different game or a different event. In my case, like maybe what else I can do in Flesh and Blood to have better results in the future. So yeah.
Yeah, well, one more thing I just wanted to add. There is something that a lot of players I know we would do, and that's making tournament reports. So if you want to share it with other people, that's great too. But what I think will be useful is to just write one just for yourself. You don't even have to share it with anybody. Write down what you thought of each matchup, how you did, and basically anything you can learn from it. If you do something like this, I know some of my friends really can really improve their game just by taking the time to think about each of their or matches, and really reflecting on what they can do to improve their game. And I think that might just be a good way to really improve your game if you're lacking in some of the more mechanical parts of the game. Like, oh, I missed a tunic trigger that mattered 3 turns ago. Maybe noting that down. So then, you can see exactly where you're losing the games at.
Yeah, and if you ever have the privilege of being on stream, going back and watching coverage is actually kind of amazing. You often see things that you might not have seen in the game, and sometimes reviewing that, or even like getting other people's opinions on those games that you played, can be like super valuable. Talking with a friend after a match can also be really valuable if they caught the tail end of it, and sometimes they notice things that you didn't see.
Yeah. But if you have really bad friends, they needle you on everything you've done wrong in a game, and they don't let you go for 3 years. So yeah, goes both ways.
Yeah, we definitely have a few of those types of friends in common, but it's all in good fun.
Yeah, it's very fun. It's very fun. Okay, and today our main topic, we're gonna be just asking Yuki some questions about what she's done so far to prep for the Pro Tour in Lille. So I'll just go straight into the questions. How many drafts have you done so far? Do you have a count or?
I don't have an exact count, but I figure like between the two draft RTNs, and then we have some like double and triple drafts, and then I've done some other drafts on top of that. I'm probably in like the 20 to 30 range, I would guess. Like maybe probably mid 20s. I'm not entirely sure though.
Okay, is that more or less drafts than you wanted to do so far?
I'd say it's about right. For me, it's less about like hitting a certain number and more feeling like I understand the format. And I'm feeling like I'm in a pretty good place with Uprising. Like in particular, I feel like I understand how to draft and play all the heroes and pretty much all the matchups for the most part, which is kind of what my goal was. I kind of in RTN season, I felt like I understood Phi and Icelander very well, but then Dromai was like a bit of a mystery for me, and I just wanted to make sure that if I'm in the Dromai seat, I know how to draft it and I know how to play it, and I think I'm kind of in that spot. I am looking forward to doing a few more drafts once I get to Amsterdam, though, just because it's always good to brush up on the format before the event. But yeah, overall, feeling pretty confident and pretty comfortable with the draft portion.
I think I've heard you do some drafts online. How does that work?
Interestingly, so there's kind of two ways to do it. You can draft online just using Tabletop Simulator. It can generate packs for you. The packs are not fantastic though, so like the distribution of the cards just feels off, and it's not quite authentic. But it's better than nothing, I suppose. Another way to do it is with a website called draftfab.com. It's pretty good. The pack collation is like mostly on point, but there is, and it's getting improved all the time, but there is some like weirdness to it where like it feels like maybe the packs don't have quite as many Icelander cards as they could, at least last time I did it. And also for example, we had one pack that had 3 red Reikthembers, one of which was like supposed to be the foil, and you can get double of a card in pitch if you have like a foil. It's pretty uncommon, but you can get it. But you're never going to get triple, and like so there's like a little bit of weirdness, but it's overall pretty good. And one really nice thing about that site too is when you're done, you can import it into TTS super conveniently, and you can also download your draft log, and it has like all the picks and like what was in the pack and what you took, as well as like all the seedings of like who the players were and where they were sitting. So that's pretty useful and can be like that's definitely something that we've looked at reviewing a little bit as well.
Okay, then I think we should put that link or is yeah the link in the description of the show notes or the I don't know what they're called the description page on YouTube. So just look underneath, you'll be able to find that.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. How much Flesh and Blood do you play every day or week or how often do you play this game right now?
Right now, I've been playing a lot. I'd say that I play most days. On the lighter days, I might play like 1 or 2 hours. On the heavier days, I might play as many as like 5 to 8 hours. That being said, sometimes by like testing, it can also be watching somebody that I test with play and like talking through lines or just it's not always like me actively playing, but often I spend a decent amount of time of that time actually playing the game. It could also be things like deck building. So like sometimes I'm not necessarily playing games, but I'm like going through sideboard plans or tech cards or things like that. So usually like about 2 to 8 hours of fab a day. That being said, that's not typically what I do. I'm just off right now for work. I'm a teacher, so I'm off for the summer, and I've been practicing a lot for Pro Tour, so that's why I've been playing so much. But typically, when I'm working, it's more like some days I don't play at all, and some days I play like 1 to 3 hours, kind of thing. So a lot less.
Yeah, that seems fair. It's good timing, isn't it, for this Pro Tour?
Yeah, it's awesome timing for me. Honestly, if it was during the work year, I probably wouldn't go at all. It's just a lot of money to fly to France just to play the Pro Tour. But since I haven't been, I've actually never been to Europe in general. So it just feels like a good kind of excuse to go on a vacation and see some of Europe. So definitely like the vacation is a big part of it for me. And the Pro Tour is like a highlight and a reason to go, but I don't think I would go just for the Pro Tour.
That's fair. That's fair. So talking about the Pro Tour, do you have a strategy going into the Pro Tour, or like for the prepping for this Pro Tour? Like, are you CC focused, or are you gonna be like more draft focused?
Yeah, so early on, I focus mostly on draft just because the draft format isn't really going to, is not really going to change. Maybe our understanding of the draft format can evolve, but it's still the same draft set. So it makes sense to focus on that early and then CC to focus on later as the metagame kind of develops and evolves. It's a bit interesting because of the recent Stubby Hammerers ban, and there just like not being that many big events. We did have Battleheart in Portland, but that's still not a huge one. We have Calling Singapore coming up next week. This will have already happened by the time you're listening to this episode, but Singapore is coming up. But even that is only a week before the Pro Tour, so it's not a lot of time to react and so yeah. CC has been like very interesting to test for and something that I've been doing in more recent weeks. But yeah, I'm generally practicing a little bit of both. I'd say overall, I'm probably more confident in my draft, but I consider myself fairly well balanced. Like I'm pretty comfortable in both.
Yeah, you even went 5-1-1 in Battle Hardened. It was this weekend because we are doing a pre-recording, but the Portland Battle Hardened. You did pretty well with that. Which hero did you play in that event?
Yeah, I played Viscerai. Nothing too crazy. It was a non belittle variant. Pretty standard list. And yeah, I think it went really well. The losses were a little bit disappointing. I think my opponents played very well in both of my losses, and they they deserved it. I guess the draw wasn't like technically a loss, but it was a double loss. And in that one, that was really on me. I could have just played a little bit faster, and I just kind of learned I need to pay better attention to the clock. I didn't realize how close to time we were. It was kind of like an awkward setting where I couldn't. There was no clock on the wall, so I didn't actually know what time it was. So that was too bad. I could have been more proactive though. And my loss into Prism just sort of highlighted for me that, well, that is a matchup that I have been very confident in. I haven't practiced it recently, and I just maybe need to go back and brush up on that matchup because, yeah, Prism is looking like a very formidable deck and one that is going to show up and probably going to do pretty well. So,
Okay. So talking about those heroes, what do you think the best heroes in CC currently are? Do you think it's just Viserai, or do you think Prism is better than it?
yeah, it's an interesting question. As I sort of alluded to earlier with the Stubbies ban, I think it's not necessarily super clear what hero is the best hero in CC or if there even is a best deck. It does feel pretty open and like a lot of decks are pretty good, and it might be one of the most diverse metas that we've seen, at least so far. Of course, as events happen, usually the best decks kind of emerge and have a bit of a target on them. But it does feel like every deck has some good matchups and then some bad matchups. So I think that because of that, as long as that stays the case, there's going to be like quite a few decks in this format. So I think like the most prominent decks in the format are kind of like you have your aggro decks, which I think are Viserai and Briar as the top dogs. I think that Phi might also be a pretty strong aggro deck, but the lists aren't really fully refined yet because like I feel like the Stubby Hammers lists were just starting to get refined, and then that card got banned, and now it's sort of back to the drawing board. So it remains to be seen what Phi can do without that card. I do think that he is pretty good, but he's also definitely more fragile than the Rune Blades. Playing armor is like usually a bit of a cost, and he has a lot of 2 blocks. So you need to be doing something better than the Rune Blades, and I'm not entirely sure what that is. That's not to say that he isn't good. I could very well see that being the case, but I think he's like a slightly worse aggro deck. So besides the aggro decks, you have the decks that are good against the aggro decks, and I would say that that is primarily the Guardians. So Oldhim and Bravo Showstopper, I think, are both very, very good. Oldhim tends to lean a little bit more defensive, and Bravo Showstopper tends to lean a little bit more proactive and disruptive. But both of them are essentially trying to take these aggro decks off of being able to play their 5-card hands efficiently. And I think that they're actually both really quite good. I'm not entirely certain which of the two is better. I don't really consider myself a Guardian player, but I think that they're both viable and they're both pretty strong. Of the two of them, I think that more players will gravitate towards Bravo just because he's a little bit more proactive, and Oldhim really seems to be like, I know that quite a few players have concerns about going to time, and I think the best Oldhim players will not go to time. Like I know like Michael Hamilton's very well known for Oldhim, and I don't think that he will be having issues going to time, but I know for a lot of people that can be stressful. Even though the deck has moved away from like the pure fatigue, I do think he tends to play a very long game, and people tend to like, I think Bravo appeals to a wider range of players, and so he'll see a little more representation, but I think they're both solid choices. The problem for both Guardians, though, is even though you have pretty solid aggro matchups, I do think that it is possible to lose to like a very well prepared aggro player. And at the Pro Tour, I'd expect that people are very well prepared and testing into those Guardian decks. And on top of that, even though you're favored, you have other matchups that are problematic. Namely, Prism is a very, very big issue for you. I think that the Prism matchup for Oldhim is pretty much unwinnable, and I think that the Bravo matchup for Prism is also really, really poor. I think Bravo can win but it's low percentage and mostly like a weaker Prism pilot. I think in the top level Prisms really aren't going to be dropping many games to Bravo at all. So I do think Guardian's viable, but maybe in my eyes, kind of the weakest of the bunch because you do have the auto loss. But I know that like very good Guardian players have an edge in the mirror. Like it's easy to the Guardian mirror is very very skill intensive. So if you feel like you're good into aggro, you feel like you're good into Guardian, it might be a good pick. The final deck is of course Prism. I think that Prism crushes Guardian. It crushes a lot of kind of like off meta decks as well, like Doranthea, Wizards. Prism just has a lot of good matchups. And while she does traditionally struggle with aggro, I think that with some of the new tools like That All You Got and Oasis Respite, she seems to be having perhaps a little bit more success. And she's just so powerful with her auras that if she gets ahead, she can kind of, I don't know, get ahead early and stay ahead and just kind of ride that to a win sometimes against aggro, even though it is pretty unfavored. And so for that reason, I know some people are looking at Prism, and there was 3 of them in the top 8 at Battle Hard in Portland, and I continue the deck. I expect the deck to continue to do well and continue to be well represented. So those are kind of like the main pillars. Um, yeah, outside of that, like maybe Dash is okay. I think that she's like a little bit slower of an aggro deck, but she's pretty good into Guardian, pretty good into Prism. I think Icelander could be viable as like anti-Guardian, anti aggro, but your Prism matchup is atrocious. So those decks are like a little more fringe, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them. I think some Dromai will show up, but again, I think there's better options.
Okay, then you've explained most of the heroes that might have some contention in the format. What are you planning on bringing right now?
Right now, I'm leaning towards Viserai. I like that. Well, Viserai doesn't necessarily have too many auto wins. I think that you're pretty good into Prism, and I think that you have some game into just about everything. I think that if you prepare and you have like plans to deal with Guardian and the fatigue that Oldhim can do, I think that you is very winnable. And because of that, I'm kind of leaning towards aggro. That being said, like the aggro mirrors are a little bit coin flippy. They're just very explosive and over very quickly, and kind of comes down to draws, like how well each of you draw. So I could see myself potentially bringing Prism as well, especially depending on the results of the Calling Singapore. I could see myself maybe switching gears, but I'll probably go with one of those two, since Viserai and Prism are kind of what I have, or 2 of the decks that I have more experience on. And I think in this meta, because there's not a clear best deck, picking a deck that is good and you're comfortable with is probably the way to go.
If at the Calling Singapore there's like a clear best deck, like half of the top 8 gets like taken by a specific hero, are you going to think about switching to them at all, or you're gonna just probably stick with these 2?
Maybe. It kind of depends what the hero is and if I think it's in my range. It also depends if I have access to the cards. The fact that I'm traveling early means that I can only bring so many decks with me. So I do have a little bit less flexibility in that regard. But we'll see. Maybe I could maybe see doing it if there's a huge breakout deck. But I kind of don't expect there to be one, honestly. Maybe that's wishful thinking, but that's kind of what I think.
Yeah, like the last Pro Tour, like the breakout deck, or like the deck that no one expected was Kano, and that came out of left field. Not many players brought Arcane Barrier, and that really just took over the tournament by storm. Essentially, like people were really talking about Kano a lot. Do you think something like that's going to happen again this time?
Maybe, but I would honestly be a little bit surprised. I think because of the existence of Icelander and her being like kind of on people's radar, people are a little more incentivized to bring some Arcane Barrier. And I also think that Prism, honestly, Prism might be more represented, or like better positioned than she was in the last meta, and so the Wizards are going to have a really hard time. And outside of that, like, I'm not really sure what deck could come out. I mean, there's always possibility for a fringe deck, but there's not really like anything that would super surprise me. Um, Maybe Dromai. I think that Dromai does have some problems into Ninja and Viserai, but I also think that Dromai is like one of the more complex heroes to build as well as to pilot. So maybe if someone can figure something out, it wouldn't surprise me if she's a pretty strong hero. But with the Dromai list that I've seen so far, I do think that those Ninja and Viserai matchups in particular are really, really hard.
That seems fair. Okay, let's move back a little bit more to the draft. Do you have a hero you want to be drafting at the Pro Tour? You have 2 drafts at the Pro Tour, right?
Yeah, there's a draft at the start of day one and a draft at the start of day two, and then 4 rounds of CC on each day. So you have like 3 draft, 4 CC, which I think is a really cool format. I'm looking forward to it. I will be trying to draft what is open or what I think is good for my seat. That's generally my strategy, but I'll probably lean a little bit towards Icelander. I think she's just my favorite to play overall. And I also think that, I find a lot of the Dromai and Phi matchups, the difference between first and second is really large, and that difference is a little bit smaller on Icelander. And I just feel like I have a little more agency over the games. The Fimir is like a weird one where sometimes when I win or lose, I don't always feel like it's like necessarily entirely in my control or because I outplayed my opponent, whereas I feel like Icelander has more opportunity to do that. That being said, I think Icelander is a hero that needs to be open, and if she's not open, I'm not going to be drafting her. So I'm pretty happy to draft any of the 3, but slight preference towards Icelander.
Okay, I hope you 3-0, mostly for the podcast. And just like a little bit of like, what is it, a preview for the next week. We're hoping to get Yuki's draft decks for both day 1 and day 2. Oh, is there a cut between day 1 and day 2? So like, do you need a specific record to play day 2?
I believe you need to be X3, so like 4-3 or better. That's what it was last Pro Tour. I'm pretty sure this one is the same. So if you can get 4 wins on day 1, you're able to play day 2. And for last Pro Tour, we had about 350 players or so. And I think X3, so I think 11-3 after 14 rounds was the record that you needed to get in. And I think 1 player bubbled out at X3. So if you're X3 and you lose very early, it could be bad for you. But if you're X3 and your losses are kind of a little bit later, like in some of the CC rounds, you're actually maybe still in contention.
Okay, then hopefully you make day 2, and hopefully we'll have 2 draft logs from you, if possible. Either just talking about your final deck that we get at the Pro Tour, that'll be good. And if we can record right after the Pro Tour, so we have a fresh look into what happened at the PT, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I'll definitely take some notes on my games and keep my decks intact. I actually still have my decks from Nationals, my draft decks. I have those intact still. So,
Oh, you do?
yeah, I just kept them since I ended up winning. I was like, I may as well keep them. It's kind of cool. They're just in a box somewhere.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
But yeah, I'll definitely hang on to them, and we'll see how it goes. Feeling pretty good about it, and I'll try and take. I don't know if I'll be able to remember all the picks, but I'll see if I have time to write down a few notes. Sometimes at the higher level events, there's not that much time because you also have to like. There's usually like some deck registration where you register someone else's pool after the draft, and then you have to verify your pool, and then you have to build it, and then you have to like say, yeah. I guess you don't have to like lock into a deck because you can change it, but you have to at least lock into a hero. And I mean that part's pretty easy, but still, like you want some time with your pool as well as you want to verify your pool. So
Yeah, you don't really want to be deciding on which hero to play during deck registration, because that typically means your draft went pretty bad, right?
Yeah, no, I was mostly getting mixed up thinking about like Magic and how you have to like indicate what your main board is, but that's not the case in Fab. So you don't have to do that, but you still have to like register someone's pool and then verify your own and then figure out for yourself how you want to build your deck and like what are your sideboard cards. So it's usually like that's not like too bad, but just all of it together ends up sometimes not leaving that much time between
Yeah,
rounds.
and I don't want you to like make your pro tour experience worse by like trying to like make notes on what you picked and why and whatever like that. You should focus on winning the pro tour because that's better for publicity anyways.
We'll see what I can do. I think it's going to be pretty stiff competition, but yeah, fingers crossed. Who knows?
Okay, and I think this question is really good for just our listeners in general, or basically anyone who's at Lil. When would be the best time to go talk to you at the PT?
In general, I'm pretty happy to talk to people. The one thing I will say is that sometimes talking between rounds is not always great. It kind of depends. Usually, there's like a clock on the wall. And if there's a lot of time between the rounds, like especially if I'm like standing around, like maybe I'm watching a friend's game or something, I'm probably pretty open to people coming up and saying hi. But if there's like 3 minutes left on the clock and you see me walking somewhere is probably because like I need to go get water or I need to use the washroom or there's like something I want to do before the next round to get ready, and that's like not a great time to talk. So anytime where there's like a reasonable, like if there's like 15-20 minutes left in the round, that's probably like a pretty reasonable time. Or if it's like after the main event has finished for that day, that would also be like a pretty reasonable time. And I think that probably, I don't want to speak for other people, but I imagine that most players will feel similar. That if you're in a rush to go somewhere, it's not always the best time to chat. But
Yeah, so if I just see you sitting around or just doing not much, in between your rounds, I can go up to you and ask you to sign my Lexi card if I wanted to.
if that is something that you wanted to do, I suppose you could do that.
Okay. Yeah. If you are gonna try and get Yuki to sign something, you should bring a felt pen with you. I don't think she's gonna, or a fine, what's it called, a marker with you, because I don't think she's gonna carry that around with her.
That's true. Yeah, I usually don't have a Sharpie. So if you do want something signed, if you have it like more or less ready to go with something to sign it with, that is super helpful. Um, yeah, yeah. Oh, and I guess I should say that everything I said about my deck selection, subject to change, but I don't think there will be a last minute crazy switch to Lexi. So sorry to the to any fans who were maybe hoping for that, but I just think that Lexi is in a tough spot right now. Mostly just the metagame is so wide and it's kind of hard to target all the different decks that are out there. And I think that she's okay. Like I think that you could get some wins with her and do pretty well with her, but I think that just there's other heroes that have a better matchup spread than she does at the moment. So yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Oof. There's also a calling attached to the Pro Tour, right? Is that the same format, CC?
I believe that the calling. Ooh, I want to say that the calling is a mixed format as well, CC and draft. I know that the previous calling and what was it? Was it Utrecht? I think it was the calling Utrecht and Singapore are both going to be mixed format. So I imagine the calling Lille is also mixed format, but I'm not 100% sure.
Oh,
I also know
I
on the.
I
Oh,
just
sorry.
pulled it up. Calling Lil is classic constructed. It's 65 euros to enter, and it's open entry, so no invitation required. So
Oh,
it looks like it is just classic constructed.
interesting. Okay. Well, yeah, who knows? Hopefully, I guess that's something I could plan, but hopefully I won't have to because hopefully I'll still be in the main event. We'll see. Um,
Is Tope played on Sunday, or is that on a different
yeah,
day?
yeah, it's played on the Sunday, so it's 7 rounds on Friday, 7 rounds on Saturday. So that's day two, and that's also when the calling starts. And then on the Sunday, there is either day either top 8 of Pro Tour, day 2 of calling, or if neither of those apply, then there's also a draft battle hardened that is uprising draft. I think it's 2 drafts. I'm not 100% sure, but I'll probably be looking to do that if I'm not in the calling or the Pro Tour top 8.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna assume you're gonna be top aiding the Pro Tour, so you don't have time for any of these other side events, right?
Well, we'll see. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Oh, looks like I have the battle hardened information up now. It says 6 rounds of Swiss across 2 draft pods, so it looks like it's just 2 drafts.
Yeah, that sounds right. So depending on the number of players, the breakers for making top 8 could be pretty brutal. You might need to be 6-0 or at least 5-0
5-0.
and then
Yeah.
lose your last round. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's how it was for the there was a Magic draft PTQ before in Portland, and the only way to get into that was to go 5-0 then lose your last round. That was the only way you can get in or bubble into the top 8 with the 5-1 record. So I'm going to assume this one's going to be very similar to that.
Yeah, I think so. I actually played at that event as well, and I went 5-1, and surely enough, I did not make the top 8. So probably expecting a lot of that for this battle hardened, but it does depend how many players show up. So we'll see.
Yeah, we don't really know the attendance level of this event. It's the first pro tour in Europe, so maybe we get a ton of players, or maybe we don't get that many players at all. We'll know in about 3. Is it 3 weeks from now or 2 weeks?
2 weeks from now.
2 weeks from now. Oh, there's actually not that much days
Or maybe like
till
10-ish days. It's on the Friday. So today is Monday. So it's like on the Friday
11 days from now.
next. Yeah. Yeah. So a week and a half from now. Yeah. It's coming up pretty soon.
Okay. I think the last little thing I just want to talk about would be Worlds. World Championship got announced earlier this week. Are you gonna go to it?
Yeah. I've already gotten my flight booked. I have a friend who lives in San Jose, I think about 15 minutes from the venue. Oliver from OKNY. So a bunch of us are going to be going and staying with him. He's generously hosting a few of us, so that's very nice of him. And I'm looking forward to it. It should be a lot of fun. Um, I expect to know a lot more people who are going to Worlds. Not that I don't know people who are going to Lille, but a lot of people from North America are unable or not willing to travel to France for the Pro Tour. It's just a lot to take on. But I think Worlds being much closer and also a bigger event, it will draw more of the people that I know. So yeah, looking forward to that. I do know there's some controversy though about the inclusion of Blitz as a format. So for anybody that doesn't know, it's I believe it's 5 rounds CC, 3 draft, then 3 more rounds of draft on day 2 and 5 rounds of blitz. Something like
12,
that.
13, 14, 15, 16. Yeah. So, yeah, total 6 rounds of draft total, 5 classic constructed, and 5 blitz. I think this is the first event that draft actually takes the highest percentage of the tournament at 6 games, and the other 2 is 5 games each. So, it's actually going to be draft is technically the most important format in Worlds.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty interesting. I mean, the top 8 is still CC, so it's also quite important. But yeah, you're going to have to win across all formats. I think with like at least 5 rounds in every format, I guess I don't know how many players there will be, but I expect that X5 is not going to make the cut. So you need to at least win some rounds, and you need to do very well in most of the formats and at least win some in the third.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I'm also actually gonna book my flight to World soon. I don't have an invite yet. I haven't got a PTI yet. I've gotten very close to getting a PTI. I got ninth at nationals. I've top eighted a battle hardened. I've is that it?
I think that's it. You also qualified for France, which is not really a PTI, but
Yeah, I've qualified for France, which I'm not going to, unfortunately. We'll talk a little bit more about that on the sign off. But yeah, I don't have a PTI yet. Hopefully this Nats I can top 8 to get the PTI to play Worlds. But I'm gonna book my flight anyways because it's pretty cheap right now. And I'm gonna play Calling San Jose no matter what. And that one is unfortunately only classic constructed. I just want a limited calling. That's all I want to do is play limited.
Yeah, that would definitely be nice. It's interesting. Worlds is going to be very interesting just because of the like Uprising will have been out for such a long time, and the CC meta could get shaken up. Like Prism's very close to Living Legend, but yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Sort of funny to have it at the tail end of the format like this, but maybe the Living Legend will be enough to shake it up and make it exciting.
Wait, are we not gonna have the expansion set before this Worlds? Is this before it?
We are not. So it's confirmed that Uprising is the draft set for Worlds and that the expansion is coming out also in November, but sometime after Worlds is announced. So it will be mostly the same format, although I feel fairly confident that Prism will be gone, if not for Nationals. Like she could be gone for Nationals if she wins Singapore, or I think there's a Battle Hardened as well as Lille. So there's like a few chances that she has, but still, like 3 events is not that many. But I think that if we have a full national season with Prism, I would be shocked if she didn't win at least one of them. So
Okay. I think that about wraps up everything I wanted to talk about today.
yeah, a little bit of a shorter episode, but next week we'll be able to fill you in on the Pro Tour and how it went. And I don't know for sure, but if we're hoping that there's draft coverage of somebody at the Pro Tour, like somebody doing well or somebody who's well known. And if there is draft coverage where we can like see the draft process and what they picked, it'd be really cool to kind of talk through those picks and talk about the implications of each of them, if what we might do or like different options they had in the draft. I think that could be pretty interesting, but we'll see how it goes. All right. That concludes this week's episode of On the Bauble. You can find us on YouTube and Spotify. And if there's other platforms you want to see us on, please let us know. We'll be sure to add it. We are your hosts, Yuki and Jay. You can find me on Twitter at YukiLeeBender, and you can find my articles on redriotgames.ca. Jay is not currently active on social media, but you can get in touch with him through email at onthebauble@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Then that's all for today. Goodbye for now.
Okay. Sign off time. This one's gonna be quite easy. So I do have my little invite for the Pro Tour by beating Yuki in the finals of our local ProQuest. That ProQuest is as a whole. Do we want? Should I talk about the ProQuest as a whole as well, or
I
that
think you
might
should
be a
talk about
different?
the top eight. I think you should talk about the top eight. So, how did you get to the finals?
Okay, so after the round, all the rounds of Swiss, I am on Starvo. Okay, as people might be surprised, sure, Starvo best deck. Unfortunately, I am not playing a good version of Starvo. I am playing probably the worst build of Starvo I have ever built. Um, and like it doesn't have barely enough of the elemental cards. I'm playing some god awful red cards, and just it was just an awful build. I don't want to talk about it too much, but in top eight, there's deck check going into top eight, and I accidentally wrote my breakground reds as breakground blues. So I get my IP2 going into the first round of the top eight. And in the top eight, my first round opponent is on chain, and like he's a very good chain player, and I was like, I'm done. Like I just this game, like this top eight's over. I need to try some other PQ to try and win to get my invite. Unfortunately, my opponent, the chain player, just completely breaks his turn. He accidentally makes a soul shackle. Oh, sorry. How did this turn go?
I think he
Yeah,
goes,
so he accidentally makes a soul shackle, plays Marvin Skies, thinking that the soul shackle doesn't give Marvin Skies go again, and then plays Ghostly Visit, thinking that the shackle will give Ghostly Visit go again, but the Marvin Skies will give the next card go again. But none of that happens, and Ghostly Visit just attacks for 4, no on hit from Marvin Skies, and does not have go again, and bricks his whole turn. And because of that, his turn was going to be like a 25 damage turn, and I was going to lose to it. But because of that, on my 3-card hand, I got to block some and come back. And then I lose my IP, so now we're in a regular game, and he's bricked his turn. He messed up his pitch stack because of that, and he takes blood debt. And I got to, and as I said, I'm playing a really bad version of Starvo, and I have Crush the Weeks in my deck, and I find like be able to chain off Crush the Week after Crush the Week and barely win on 1 life.
yeah.
So I don't lose with my IP2, which is insane.
Yeah, we were all shocked. Honestly, we couldn't believe that we were all laughing at Jay for getting his IP2 because he like wrote his deck list. He wrote out his deck list in a hurry at the event, and then we were all kind of like, you know, needling him a little bit, and then he just like pulled out. And he's like, "No, I won." Like, what do you mean you won?
Yeah, it was a little crazy. And then on my second round, um, I play against our very good Reinhardt in our local group. He's probably the best Reinhardt player that I know. But there was a point in the game where we're both nearly at fatigue. Because I'm playing a very defensive Starvo deck. And he's decided to play a defensive Reinhardt against my Starvo. And he's at 1 life, and he blocks with Reckless Swings. And I'm at 1 as well. So I can't crown to survive anymore. But he pitches Beast Within as his card with Reckless Swing. Like it's like a random discard. He has to discard Beast Within. And I'm like, oh wow, Reckless Swing, I lose. Wait, you discarded Beast Within. You have to flip the top card of your deck over, and you're at 1 life. So you lose before I lose through the Reckless Swing.
Yeah. So Jay manages to once again squeak out a win. When we all thought he was doomed. And then maybe I'll talk about our finals match. I'm top seed. And or I'm at least, I don't know if I'm top seed, but I'm at least higher seed than Jay. So I get to go first as Lexi, which is what I want. I set up my arsenal with like not a super great arsenal. My problem is that I have like all my good cards, like my Three of a Kinds, my Art of Wars, my Rain Razors, but I don't have any arrows. And I try to like filter my hand. I try to set up my arsenal, and I believe I end up arsenaling an Art of War, and I think I go like Rain Razor. I think I play an Art of War turn 1 to try, or a Three of a Kind turn 1 to try and get a better arsenal because I already have another Three of a Kind, and I just draw into more power cards.
No.
Is it not?
You played both Art of War and Three of a Kind on your first turn.
No. So I think turn 0 I play Three of a Kind to try and filter my hand.
Okay.
And then on my next turn, I think I play Three of a Kind with an Art of War and Arsenal. And I believe I also blow Rain Razors, thinking that I'm going to be able to find something by getting 5 looks at cards. And I just don't draw any arrows. I just draw more like Three of a Kinds and Art of Wars. And suddenly I'm down, I think I was down like 2 Three of a Kinds, 2 Rain Razors, and Art of War. And I attacked Jay for 8 damage or something. It was an incredibly bad turn of events, and he proceeds to fatigue me out in a very very close game, grinding me out in the end game. And
Yeah, I
yeah,
think I was at like 1 or 2 life at the end of that game, and this is like Yuki just like just binning, just taking her best cards from her deck and placing it in the graveyard for me, and then I barely win this game. So I didn't deserve any of the wins in top eight, but I got it. And now because I had this Pro Tour invite, I really wanted to go to Lille. But Yuki was on the fence about going to Lille because it's like so expensive to go. She didn't have her invite yet because I beat her in the finals of this one, and she didn't really want to use a PTI and like so much money to travel there. What ended up happening was like we made a road trip the week after to Seattle to play a bunch of the PQs there for a weekend. And on the way back, she's like, "Wait, I can qualify through XP." And I'm like on the bubble. Uh and did you end up playing an extra armory on the Monday?
I did. So when we were driving back, the cutoff was on the Monday the next day at midnight. And I ended up like on the drive back, I was like as very exhausted and frantically looking for online armories that I could play when I get back. So after getting back at I don't know, 1 a.m. or something after playing. We played two Battle Hardens and drove back, or sorry, two ProQuests and
Yep.
drove back right after the second one. I get back at 1 a.m. and I play an armory immediately. I think I'm actually like 5 minutes late. I play an online armory immediately with some Australian players. Um, and I'm up until like 4, and then I have to go to work the next morning, and then I show up at my local armory on the Monday evening just to try and like get a couple more wins in, and I just squeak in on XP, like just barely.
Yeah, I think they posted um the PT2 like qualified players through XP, and Yuki's not on there on the first one. But the day after, I think LSS makes an article saying, "Oh, we actually made the wrong cutoff date or something like that." And here's the new updated list of who actually made it to the PT2 through 90-day XPs, and these are going to be just additional invites. And there's like 3 names on it, and one of it's Yuki.
Yeah, I think what it was that for some, they said that for some players, XP hadn't been updating, and I noticed that. I was like, I have like 2 weeks worth of XP that hasn't, like, it's just pending. And at the time, I was like, I think I'm a pretty outside shot to make it, but I would like to know like how close I was, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they updated it, I was like, wow, I somehow made it. I really didn't think this was going to happen. So
And then
yeah.
fast forward a couple of months, I end up going to Vegas for the what is it? What was it? The calling? The world premiere for Uprising. That's what it was.
But that's not
And
all you go for.
no, I also go for the World Series of Poker. And I get staked in that by random various people, and I win a bunch of money. But I end up playing a little bit too much craps and blackjack and lose a little bit too much money, which puts me at a point where I can't really afford the flight to Lille anymore and have to skip on it now. So I basically convinced Yuki to go to Lille and qualify so that we could go together and like play in it together essentially. But then I gambled a little bit too much at Vegas. Not the good kind of gambling, the real bad kind of gambling, and now I can't go to Lille and now have to win the nationals coming up or something to try and get my world's invite instead of trying to get a very reasonable shot at top 32ing this PT.
Yeah. And all of this is, of course, after Jay beat me in finals of our local ProQuest and made me have to travel more and grind more events, just to decide that he's not going to go. So There you go. Jay costing me the maximum here.
Yeah, every time, every time. Don't worry, I got you every time. Okay, I think that's a long sign off. So we'll just call it here.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Well, good luck at the pro tour, and goodbye to the listeners.
Good night, everyone.